You are. You good?
Be careful. Jesus.
Take your time.
Please don't break anything on camera.
He starts to fall. Please catch him.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience to the Lincolnville Selectmen's meeting. It is December 9th. Kern, would you please read the quote of the evening?
Blessed is he who expects nothing, for he shall never be disappointed. Alexander Pope.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to open the podium for any non-agenda items. Seeing nothing, let's move rapidly along to the administrator's report.
Just to let the public know, dog licenses expire at the end of this month. If you haven't licensed your dog, you can do so online 24 hours a day or here at the town office during normal business hours. Please do it before the late fees are imposed. The late fees are part of state statute. We can't waive them. We can't not collect them. If you own a dog, be responsible. License your dog. For the board's knowledge, next meeting we're going to have some preliminary discussions about budgetary goals, if you have any, or projects for the upcoming year, because we're in the throes of starting to prepare the FY21 budget. So just get your juices flowing on that. Otherwise than that, I guess the agenda is it.
Okay, any questions for David? All right, let's move along to upcoming meetings and announcements.
All meetings are here at the town office unless announced otherwise. Planning board meets Wednesday, December 11th, 7 p.m. Lakes and Ponds actually got canceled after this, right, Gary? Conservation Commission meeting has been canceled. The Lakes and Ponds Committee has been canceled. And the Wage and Personnel, which isn't listed on here, is meeting on Tuesday, December 17th at 5 p.m. at the town office. And the Board of Selectmen meet next on Monday, December 23rd at 6 p.m.
Thank you very much. Are there any upcoming community events anyone wishes to share? Seeing nothing, let's move along to the meeting minutes from the 25th of November.
I move that the board approve the November 25th, 2019 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And we have representatives from the Conservation Commission here to talk to us about our last charge to them. Who's the lucky individual?
Hi, Will Brown, Lincolnville. Right, so you gave us a charge back several months ago. So we've been doing some research on that, and I won't read through the whole thing about the charge because you've had that information. However, people at home, I should give a little bit of information to that might be watching. So I'll just go down through the points as they were listed. A, the history of BTM, brown-tail moth, particular focus on Lincolnville. And at this point, I just want to acknowledge some thanks to Diane O'Brien and Jane Hardy and the Lincolnville Historical Society for information that they dug up for us in the town records. Their records there, I should say. And also Arlene Layton and Liz and Bruce Leacock, who have been in the thick of the whole situation where they live over on Youngtown Road for a long period of time this year. And they gained immense knowledge and did immense research. And we will all be doing immense research from here on out, I believe. Which brings up an aside, tongue-in-cheek, how is the drone project with the power washer attached coming?
Working on it.
Working on it, good. My thought is to train red squirrels to like the moths. I think they'd be very effective. Okay. So history, the one thing about the history is they did find in the Historical Society an infestation record back in 1905 when it was in town. And at that point, the apple trees were the basic affect. But interestingly, the importance noted had to do with, of course, the apple crop, economics in the town, and economics in the town in terms of its effect on the summer visitors, tourism. So same situation is a modern day situation, a little over 100 years ago. But that's about all the information that was dug up. Makes me wonder, well, what happened between then and now in terms of our town? Doesn't seem to be any documentation there. The second point, assessment of the current situation. We had a rough year. McGonagall watershed area seemed to be hit very hard. And oak trees were predominant, although predominantly hit, other than also fruit trees were too. But the oak trees were probably the things that people traveling along the roadside noticed the most, or people maybe walking in the woods. By the middle of July, they were going into from caterpillar to moth stage. And then there was a slight refoliation that occurred on a lot of the trees. I travel Youngtown and the hill down to McGonagall Lake and noticed how stripped it became, how quickly it was stripped of leaves, that area, and then was surprised to start to see it come back at a certain point, although it never came back fully. The wet weather was a help, we understand. If it had been a dry spring, we might have had a worse situation. And it seems that the only natural critter, it's not even a critter, there's a fungus that seems to attack the caterpillar, and that seemed to help a bit. But beyond that, there's not much so far. An estimate of the future of the BTM situation, well, it's hard to say. Obviously it's going to be weather dependent to a large degree. That seems to be the one dependable thing, that if we have a wet season, we may have less of a situation to deal with. Economic impact. Well, it brings me to, I'm going to go from there right over to the first attachment that was on the back of this 5-page document, which was some communication that I had with the tree warden in the town of Yarmouth, in the southern part of the state, because we knew they had been dealing with this situation for a while. And I just want to read a little bit of that letter. Its title is Attachment 1, Yarmouth's BTM Experiences. The fellow's name, Andrew Gabrielson. And these are some of the things that he pointed out to me in that letter. I'll just skim through it a bit. He was saying that Yarmouth has been dealing with a significant BTM infestation for several years. They have seen many oaks become completely defoliated, and they have had to take down several that became unsafe. All the while, wheels turning here in the back of your head as to how that, applies here, or could apply here. Generally, their town focuses on trees that are clearly on public land and in the public way, along roadside. There are times when, what started to occur in my head before I wrote this letter to him was, well, in that kind of situation, I know from dealing with Central Maine Power and Maine Department of Transportation in terms of roadside trees that are tree hazards, hazardous trees that might fall and on the road or on the power lines and such. There have been situations in town where the question comes up, well, who pays the bill for this tree that needs to be taken down? That's a huge, big old oak tree. Who pays the bill? And sometimes it's clear the CMP needs to deal with it, and if they'll deal with a limb that's a problem, they'll deal with that. If it's a huge tree, then sometimes they'll deal with that. Same with MDOT. The town so far, I don't think has had to do much financially. However, when you think about the magnitude of this potential problem with BTM, if it became really serious and lasted for a few years to the point where even healthy trees were not going to come back, it could be a very costly situation. So I'm sure it's going to go. That would go all around Robin Hood's barn in terms of where that responsibility would come up, tree by tree. There might be a judgment that have to be passed. But what Yarmouth says is that in their experience there, based on the risk to public property and to residents, that sometimes they have split the costs And I think in this point, they're talking more about property owners and the town's budget. He didn't mention anything about MDOT or CMP or power companies at this point with that. But they have split the cost in some situations. They've tried pesticide treatments, but that's even trickier. And they've done some hydromisting as well as root zone injecting. And he mentions that in that particular sentence, so I think he's just talking about those chemical treatments, that they've spent several $1,000s over the course of time in Yarmouth. And that's as specific as it gets, but we all understand what the implication of that is. Fortunately, he says, we had a cold, wet spring, and the devastating fungus significantly knocked down the caterpillar population. It's hard to know how much our treatments affected the pest, and that is frustrating. We won't be able to count on environmental control, but it helped this year with the wet season. So that was what he said to us in terms of their experience. Some of it relatively generic, and some of it pretty specific in terms of the impact, potential impact in the future. And we just don't know, because so much of it has to do with just how the climate's going and the weather's going. One of the questions that comes up is, how can residents recognize and treat brown-tailed moth? And there have been a couple of gatherings, one over at the Snow Bowl. Tom Smielk, who's a state entomologist, gave a presentation over there. Must be a couple of months ago now, I guess. And recently he was up in Stockton Springs and gave another one. And there's one coming up this Thursday night at the Camden Library for everybody, but I think Rockport, Lincolnville, and Camden will be well represented at that to talk, because in terms of looking ahead towards where money might come from to deal with this, if a way comes about that we can deal with it, there's going to need to be documentation first as to need. And in order to do the documentation, you need to have people trained to do the proper documentation in terms of the state's requirements. So one of the questions that I know we've been talking about in the Conservation Commission is to try to encourage that training to occur, because there's, in January through March seems to be the time to do it, to be looking for next year's population of caterpillars, that the nests are up there in trees, and a lot of them not in the trees they were in this year, in different trees. But to do that documentation, imagine yourself standing on the ground. You need binoculars for one, and I guess you're supposed to stand with the sun at your back, so you'll have the light will affect the view of the nests in the trees. But the documentation needs to be done, so we're going to try to encourage that we can get going on that training ASAP and get a crew together. And I think that that's something that anybody, a homeowner, might be interested in too, to come. And certainly, as things go, the more people that lobby for a need to have that training, the better the chances are that there'll be a response in some way, shape, or form, so that we can get that training. Because we all know, if we look up in the trees at the nests, how do we get there? How do we get to these nests that are in the top of these oak trees that are up 45 or 50 feet high? And there's a zillion of them up there. That's where the drones and the red squirrels come in. They would be really handy, I think. So we're going on Thursday night to that meeting in Camden, and we'll just try to see if we can lobby for a training session to be set up through the state in the future, as soon as we can. Richard, Mike, have I left anything out of importance right off the bat that you'd like?
Nailed it.
Think we nailed it? Okay, all right. So, any questions? I'll let that be it for the moment, but yeah. Any questions or thoughts? And anybody else in the public? Because this group over here are probably just as far more knowledgeable even than I in some ways.
Well,
May
I'll
have
be
things to say.
I'll be certainly interested to hear what the results of this meeting is and how we can help facilitate training for this survey to happen in
Yeah.
a informed way.
Right.
So please keep us in the loop
Yeah.
with regards to that. Now, do you have a question for the board, or do you have a question for the committee that
Comment
could?
to the committee.
Oh.
Just a comment.
Shh, sure, come on up to the podium.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that this doesn't become a conservation committee audience meeting rather than a select board meeting, because we do have other business, so.
Yes, right. Okay, John Williams, Crowley Road in Lincolnville. While you're doing surveys, it might be nice to just snap lots of pictures. And I don't know how to do this, but artificial intelligence is everywhere. You can train on pictures. And wouldn't it be nice to have that in the future? All you do is go around with a drone and just scan, just fly all over the forest, all over the place, feed it into a computer, and it starts counting nests for you in the future. So if we had a database of pictures, that's a start. Yeah, that's all my comment is.
Thank you.
Try and mention that at camp and see what people think.
Yeah.
Did I just hear the town needs a drone?
No, let's not.
I thought I heard that. Sorry.
But I mean, I'm here, thank you for this wonderful report. It's really fantastic, and
thank you.
so appreciate all of the thought and effort that clearly went into this. And I feel proud that I feel like our community is really taking the lead on this, when I think a lot of other folks are just sort of throwing their hands up, because it's very easy to do that because it feels overwhelming. But I'll be really curious to see what sort of known tools and efforts we can apply to at least help gather data to support the existing bureaucracies in assisting us. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Will or anyone of the Conservation Committee at this point?
One.
Sure, come on down.
Just very, very quick, just another suggestion for the Camden thing. Wouldn't it have been interesting, and maybe they have, to save samples of the brown-tailed moth from 1905?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody might do some genetics sometime, see if it's new populations, start to learn about them. So if we save some, maybe someone is at the university or something, that could be something for the future.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll mention is a thought. I know that the budget request form came around in terms of commissions or organizations in town looking ahead towards the budget year. And one difficulty with the brown-tailed moth is that because of their cycle, it doesn't really correspond with the town's budget cycle. So in other words, if we need to put in some kind of a budget request to the town for this project, we'll call it, we can't really do it this coming week because we're not in a position, we're not trained to do the surveys. We haven't done the surveys, so we really are a year away from anything right off the bat. But in terms of the liability issue to the town, it makes me wonder if there's any way that anyone could approach setting aside some money in contingency of some way that would be there to deal with the ramifications of the affect in town. It could be down to personal health issues for some people or whatever, I don't know. But it's just something I'm thinking about, so I just want to throw that towards you.
Yeah, well.
I'm sure you're thinking about it too.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say not presenting us with a sum during budget presentations is always helpful. So the sooner the better, but there's a little bit of a grace period, but I would say I would encourage your committee to put your collective heads together, and perhaps you may be able to glean some parameters, after this Thursday's meeting, and through David, give us a communique of, you know, this conservative ballpark would give us an amount to get started, because always the argument has to be made to the budget committee and the voters at large also. So the more information with the argument behind the sum and the sooner, the
Yep.
better. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No more questions?
Great,
Thank
Okay.
you, Will.
much
Thank you.
appreciated, thank
you.
you. And now I'd like to move on to selectmen updates. David, do you have anything to report?
In Midco Solid Waste, we did have finally get our acts together and have a personnel committee meeting last Thursday. That went very well. We made good headway on the project we were working on. I think that will be available and presented to the board on next Wednesday's meeting. We set up yearly meetings for the rest of the year, so that's done. We've already agreed as to when we're gonna meet, where we're gonna meet, and who's gonna be there, and everybody's on the same page, so that should work. So that was one of the main goals I wanted to get done, was to get it, so we weren't calling around trying to figure out where we were going to meet, and we just need to know what we're doing now, but that will come.
That's fantastic. I hope that feels
Yep,
substantive.
yep, it does.
It's good. Great work. John, any updates you wish to offer the board? I don't want.
I have nothing, no.
Great. You made it home safely. You made it home safely. Welcome home. Hot, coming in hot. Kurt, any?
I'm awake.
With respect to Midco Solid Waste, I'm also on another committee, much like David is. The governance committee, we've elected to meet an hour and a half before our monthly board meeting, so that's etched in stone. Usually it's an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and we take a little bit of a break before we get into our board meeting. We will have recommendations to the board, hopefully by our next board meeting, on maybe some verbiage explanation to accompany bylaws and interlocal agreement, because there's verbiage in there that could go either one way or another. And it's very important for each board member from each town to be on the same page with the interpretation of both the interlocal agreement and everything that's in that, and the bylaws. So we're working very hard on that, to have that insert, whatever she called it, Deb Hall, I like her, I really do, Rockport's representative, so we're working on that. I am also part of the Midco Solid Waste Strategic and Capital Planning Committee, which we will be having our second meeting Wednesday night, and we'll have we definitely will have some recommendations for the boards for the upcoming meeting for this month, on some expenditures for the budget for Midco Solid Waste, or for some recommendations for the upcoming budget for Midco Solid Waste that have to do with closure and also changes in focus and equipment replacement. So I feel that Midco Solid Waste is starting to gain some traction under our new manager. Been a few bumps in the road, but all in all, I feel that the committees and the board are starting to gain traction on stuff that went behind because we had so much going on without a manager. So I'm proud to be. I really felt that this was going to be too time consuming for me, but I know when you believe in something that is so worthwhile, you have to make time, and I'm pretty proud to represent us along with David in that. We're a big part of it, even though we're one of the two smaller towns, and this town should be proud of what Lincolnville's done down there.
Yeah, thank you both very much
Yeah.
for sticking with it,
Both made.
and through, and you know, David and his part in going through, I don't think anyone in the general public will appreciate the hard work.
That all the towns, there are 4 towns in this, and all the towns put in a tremendous amount of time. Some behind the scenes, and it's just, people don't understand what it takes to run a dump. And do it right. And it's something.
Yeah.
I never did, I know that.
Thank you for the update. How was the
So
commissioners
the
meeting?
budget committee, the Waldo County Budget Committee, we passed the county budget. And it went up, if you include the jail, it went up 6.21%. Most of that is payroll, for employees. There was a large increase in the health insurance benefits for the employees of the county. Fun fact, Waldo County self-finances their health insurance. They self-insure their employees, and because of that have saved probably, at least hundreds of thousands of dollars since they started that, I believe, 7 years ago. But once in a while there are some large hits, and so they needed to increase that line a little bit. But no real major changes in the budget.
So, wasn't there also the car, the vehicle that they just ordered, that the police department just ordered? Isn't that
The hybrid?
a hybrid?
Yeah, so
That's gonna go through, right? One of the first police
yeah.
departments in the area to do that?
Yep, our sheriff's department has a hybrid police cruiser, pursuit rated, on order. They ordered it, I think, in July, and it should be here hopefully next month. So they're really proud to have that on order, and if it goes well and the numbers check out, then they may certainly order more in the future. Oh, and I toured the east and west dams in Camden with with the dam agent, and it's striking to be on these very large, expensive structures that were built in the 1900s that are holding back, McGonagall Lake, and it really impresses on you how important it is that these don't fail, because I was asking the dam agent, what happens if there's a catastrophic failure? And he said, well, most likely there's going to be a loss of life downstream, and so it's really essential that those are maintained well, and they don't have a structural failure. But I urge everyone on the board and people in the public that are interested to reach out to the dam agent and ask for a tour, because it's really eye-opening.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Let's move along. We have our citizens group, the energy team, here to give us an update.
Thank you. I'm Gary Galesian, representing the energy team today. And I've got a quick update for you on looking into the possibility of solar at the Lincolnville Central School. As I think you're aware, after we worked on the fire station array and the LED lights at the beach, which are now in, which is great to see, and we're getting a lot of good feedback on that, we turned our attention to the Lincoln School, the Central School, because it really is the largest user of electricity for the town, and there's a lot of potential there, I think, both to save money and to do good for the environment as well. I think the last time we briefed you, we were talking about exploring putting a solar array somewhere on town property next to the school, and in particular we were looking at the parcel just out behind the town office here. And as we started looking at that, it looked as though it was going to be very challenging to put something in there. There are wetlands out there, and it would be hard to do it without impinging on those wetlands. You'd have to clear about an acre of trees for the array and another acre or more to prevent shading of the panels themselves. You need access to them as well, so it would require maybe putting in some kind of a road next to the the post office to get in there. So it was very challenging, very complicated, and it would have added to the costs. At about that time, when we came to that realization, Revision Energy approached the 5 towns of the 5-town school district plus Union 99 as well, with the idea of setting up a remotely located solar farm, and this would be a solar farm that would be down in Livermore Falls, where they're developing about 20 acres, and they're looking to the schools, both at the high school level and at the elementary, middle school level, to be off-takers from that. And it looks like it's a really good deal. John has sort of run the numbers. We looked at a bunch of different scenarios. It works a little differently from the way a PPA would work, or is working for us now, because there's no upfront capital costs at all. You just end up paying a rate of electricity that's geared to the rate that the utility charges, and it's generally going to be lower than what we're paying now. So the estimates that we've made are that there would be savings over the term of this 20-year contract of anywhere between $150,000 and $230,000, and about $8,000 in the first year. So you don't have this issue of having to have any kind of a capital expenditure in order to reap the benefits long term.
Is that savings for the whole school district or just?
That would be just for the Lincolnville schools. So right now, the Lincolnville school bills are about $40,000 a year, and in the first year, they'd be reduced by about $8,000. So we've been working closely with the school committee. We've been at their meetings for the last several months, and they're looking at it, but they have some concerns about taking action that would bind future boards, much in the way that you need to be concerned with that as well, because it's a 20-year contract. Before all is said and done, there might be an investment of $800,000, $600,000 to $800,000. So even though the hearing from Union 99 that had some lawyers look at this issue, they have the ability to sign on to it, say without voter approval. They feel much more comfortable taking this issue to the voters to get approval. They aren't in a position to call a town meeting, but you are. I talked to Dave about the issue, and he said the way that it could possibly work would be for the school committee to come to you and ask you to have a town meeting to look at this issue.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other things that I spoke to Dave about in terms of maybe having taking a close look at Lincolnville, the Lincolnville School Committee's authority specifically to sign on to this contract. Because I think the way that it would work is that the voters would say the school committee is authorized by us to enter into a contract. We want to make absolutely sure that that's the case, the way in which the state ordinances work. There was some concern on the school committee from the reading that they had done about potential toxic constituents that are associated with solar panels. They have cadmium in them, they have lead in them. I think that's another reason why there was a little hesitancy for them to take that action. We've been doing some research on that, but that's an issue that could be aired at a town meeting as well, so we could get the expressed desires of the voters considered as part of it. Dave's thought was that the school committee would need to come to you and make a request to hold a meeting. We think it makes sense to go with a special town meeting because this is sort of a deal that isn't going to last forever. right now, this farm that's being developed by Revision Energy takes advantage of the 2019 federal tax credits, which are 30%. And in 2020, it goes down to 26%. The year after that, it goes down to 22%. So those are very significant differences over the life of the contract of thousands of dollars. And it's possible that it will get fully subscribed by other towns, and they're really looking to school districts to the extent that they can, because as institutions, the investors really want to have an entity that's going to be around for a while. And they figure town governments and schools will be, whereas other commercial users or residential users may not be. So we're prime users, but we need to, I think, act quickly. So we're going to look more closely into that issue of when this needs to happen, talk to the school committee about it in terms of when that request may come forward, but it might be better for it to happen sooner rather than later.
Well, and just as a point of clarity, it wouldn't be the schools or the municipalities receiving tax credits. It would be the investors for.
Right, the investors, so they can charge you a better price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone have any questions for Gary?
I don't know.
How does
Just
that,
that tree laying on the roof.
how does the remote, so they're building the farm in Livermore Falls, so how does it,
Yeah, so this is the new legislation that was passed in Maine for solar. And so long as the town is in the same district, the CMP district,
Yeah.
they allow that trading off. So they end up putting it into the grid
Right,
and we
okay.
end up getting credit
Credits.
for it.
Oh, so that's gone through, oh,
Yeah,
man,
so it got
I
passed.
have not,
Yeah.
I remember talking to John about that being in the
Yeah.
works, because they got it over in Vermont, and I remember that was this whole solar farm thing, and I wasn't, right.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a land rush going on in Maine right now with the
Oh.
commercial solar companies
Wow. Oh.
looking for places where they've got the kind of three-phase power they need and the right kind of land. So I think that the early comers to this are the ones that are going to be getting the
oh, that's right,
the best
We had a
deals on it.
didn't we, wasn't there a conversation about the AAO?
Mhm.
Yep. All right, it's all coming back to me now, sorry.
Any other questions for?
So in a perfect world, if we had a big beautiful field here that we could just install all the solar, we would end up saving money because we would own it through a PPA after 7 years when we bought them.
I guess not necessarily. There's sort of a lot more risk if the town were to develop it itself, and there are also economies of scale. So this would be a 20-acre site. We only need about an acre of panels, so there's a really big difference in economies of scale. And then also there'd need to be the capital outlay after the 6 years as well. And it turned out that developing the site here would have been very complicated, I think, for the town in terms of bringing contractors in, clearing the site, making sure we didn't have problems with wetlands, and taking on the risk of things failing as well. So right now, essentially what we're doing is we're just purchasing electricity at an adjusted price from the investors of Revision Energy.
So the people paying to have it built are investing, they're investors investing in Revision, Revision's
Yes.
putting it up, they'll be the owner, so it's like a private, it'll be a private ownership
Yes.
of some sort. And then they'll sell to the towns, and they're trying to get, all right.
Yeah, they like
Which is
towns that
not
are coming here.
dissimilar than how the PPA work that we entered into. is.
Right, except we own this now.
No, we are still involved in the power purchase agreement, so we're still.
Oh, okay.
Their investors are realizing the tax credits from the investment.
Oh, okay.
And we're realizing.
Oh, we're not ultimately purchasing that then.
But you're putting
We could in the
aside,
future.
you're putting
have that
putting
option.
aside
Okay.
money to
Right.
do it, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Well,
Thank you,
we'll
yeah.
look forward to seeing how this.
I've got one
Yeah.
tidbit I want to share with Gary, since he and I had a conversation. Reached out with Diane Halpern, the superintendent, and they, as you alluded to, they actually have the authority to enter into this contract, because the contract apparently will have a non-appropriation clause.
Perfect.
Kind of like our snow plowing contract. If the
Yep.
people won't fund it, we don't have to go through and we can get out. So that's why some towns are willing to opt in, or some school committees are willing to opt in and can.
Yeah.
But you can always choose not to do that and go to the voters and ask for approval to it.
Excellent.
And I think, since other towns are doing it, that's good for us too, in terms of looking at these contracts. So I think that Camden and Rockport are in. This very night, Hope is hearing from Revision, and we're hearing that they're likely to go for it. Appleton, and the reason they're not having a town meeting is that they had that big solar issue on their, at their town meeting last year. And I think that schools were sort of contemplated as part of that. So they're feeling comfortable going ahead without it. But Appleton is planning to have a town meeting too.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll be,
Thank you.
Great.
we'll be here. And if there's nothing else on that, we have Amanda here from 2A Architects to give us an update.
Like that fancy easel?
That's all that matters.
All
Welcome.
right. Thank you. Well, I thought I'd just, for the benefit of the board and also anyone who might be listening or here, just give a little update on the progress we've made over the last several months, and then we can talk about particulars. The board gave us their go-ahead to proceed with estimating and some further analysis of the building. We proceeded with that. One of the big items that came into play during this past time period is that we had further structural analysis done on the building, and I should say that we're talking about the LIA building, the schoolhouse building down near the beach. We had the structural engineer come in, take a look at the floor joists, which were, as we could have probably guessed, undersized for the use of the structure. That involved some selective demo work, which has been replaced. The building's back in working condition again, good condition, but we received from them an outline of recommendations, which we've included in the estimate that you have seen. We then provided that information along with these drawings. If you need me to walk through these, I'm happy to. Drawings and an outline spec we provided to the estimator for his work, and then received the estimates back a week or so ago. Just as an overview of the estimate itself, since that was the ultimate goal here, he provided two options. One including exterior siding and windows that were cedar siding and clad wood windows, that being kind of the upper end option at $624,000. The vinyl siding and vinyl windows at $580,000. So in with that estimate was the full scope of work that we described in our original summary. And in addition to that, items that we discussed here or discovered later, which included full replacement of the building's foundation, which was recommended by the board, and I wholeheartedly agree with that approach, which also included improvements to the crawl space to prevent further moisture migration in the building. So a thin slab, a rat slab, vapor barrier, and some excavation to provide proper headroom height down there so it can be accessed better in the future. We also went ahead and included a bulkhead in that estimate as a line item, just again to increase the ease of access, the structural allowances that I just mentioned, and then it does include, although it's minimal, it does include a little bit of an allowance for damage that might occur when the building is lifted and set back down. Plaster in that building is quite loose on the interior in some places, so there could be some damage, and it's just not possible to fully estimate that, but there's an allowance in there. One thing to point out is that the estimate doesn't include a hood system for the kitchen. As you might recall in the report, the state fire marshal, after our discussion with them, was willing to allow the option of basically using the ranges that are there for warming, but not for cooking anything that has grease in it. Let's see, we also, the estimate assumed that the work could be done in warmer months, so there weren't costs in there for heating or other winter conditions. And then we also provided the estimate for the remaining services going forward to finish the design. So I think that's sort of the brief summary of what we've done so far. What we'd like to hear from you is what you think the next steps are and where this leaves you in your process and how we can help. Any
Questions
thoughts?
for Amanda? Anything immediately?
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the first, I mean, it's a lot of money.
I'm not at all surprised.
And we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
No.
But just to see the actual number,
Mhm.
I shouted, I went, whoa, when I saw it.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I actually.
Felt it.
Now,
Yeah,
can I ask a bad question?
please.
Off the cuff, not that we can hold you to this or
Yeah.
anything, just a total guesstimate. Cheaper to bulldoze it and build a new building the same size?
Good question.
I mean, I know we can't
Wow.
hold you to this, but are
That's a
we in
good
the
question.
ballpark here, or are we, is this still a savable structure?
Well, it's definitely savable.
I mean, savable, but
Yep.
affordable savable.
It's savable. We have roughly a 3,000 square foot building here with a crawl space and foundation to build. The last estimate we just got back for another structure was a new commercial building was somewhere in the range of about $270 a square foot. That building has a lot of walls, doors, offices, things like that, but nonetheless, if you're thinking $250 a square foot even, you'd be above this estimate.
Be above this estimate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I-
Plus, on this site, I think we would probably find that some of the setbacks wouldn't work with current codes. We'd be talking about a different site, we'd be talking about parking, more further
That's-
excavation.
My follow-up question though
Yeah.
is that $250 per square foot completely finished, because this number that we have before us is not a finished building. This
That-
isn't a completely renovated building. This is a structurally sound building.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is the difference, because we're talking about new construction, you're paying more, but you're getting new construction out of it.
Right, you'd have finished details, so what we're talking about with this number, just so that everybody understands, is same flooring, ceiling, plaster, paint. We would have an ADA accessible, washroom.
Yes.
We would have a completely sound envelope, roof, all of that good stuff, but it wouldn't be new. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not in favor of bulldozing it. I do want to make that perfectly
that on
clear,
the
because I'm
record,
sure I'm
yes,
going to
yeah.
get nailed on that
Yeah.
tomorrow. But, you know, just for the
Yeah.
off the cuff, just so that
No,
we
that's a
have
good
something to
question.
compare it against.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, we've just seen the commercial pricing come up and up and up, and it's hard to say where it'll be, but in the latest instance we have, we were close to $270 a square foot. Like I say, that building had more details to it maybe than we would have here, but nonetheless, it's a consideration.
So basically, if we want to save this building, would you argue that the 580,731 is really, we pretty much need everything here for it to be sound and safe and compliant?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, just as for everyone's information, the reminder of what started this is that we wanted to take care of the exterior walls, the envelope of the building, and really not even the envelope, just the siding at that point. So this estimate includes all of that work that was the original goal of the project, as well as, like you're saying, all of those upgrades that are needed to really utilize the building as the town should. Code compliant, accessible, safe. I mean, you can see in the structural engineer's report that they have expressed through phone calls and in this letter to Dave and I that really the upstairs should be only minimally occupied in its current condition.
Yeah.
It's that grossly undersized structurally, so, yes.
Okay. For
Yeah,
me, for me personally, I'll preface this by saying that I've only been in this building a handful of times, and I know that it is near and dear to many people's hearts. I'm not convinced we should save it, because this is a lot of money, and I don't know if we could potentially use this for a better use for the people of Lincolnville. That could be a smaller building, but perhaps that could, not 3,000 square feet, but something that could serve the same uses. It wouldn't have the historical value, but it's a lot of money for an old building. Just not convinced yet.
But what actually is the historic value? I mean, they've used it as a meeting place for years and years and years. But what is the historic?
Well,
I don't know.
into less and less of a degree
Yeah.
to be utilized. Well, what I would say is, before we get into either a philosophical, financial, or emotional conversation regarding the nature of this building, first I want to say thank you to you and your firm
Yeah.
and the
Very
people that you
welcome.
partnered with, because I know that you have gone above and beyond. I know that you've put extra
It's just
effort
been-
in, and that has not gone unnoticed or.
Thank you, we appreciate the
this is great.
opportunity to look at it,
No,
yeah.
it's
I
really
see
clear
how
information.
early you
It's
got
super
going.
helpful.
Yeah, you might actually.
Well, and knowing the sensitive nature, and I think there isn't a single person sitting up here that wasn't aware of the fact that what we're talking about really has nothing to do with dollars and cents or the physical structure. So that being said, we also are under an obligation to spend our taxpayers' dollars in the most appropriate way, and just fixing the siding wasn't that.
Yes.
And clearly what this has revealed is a justification of all of those decisions.
And to just do something like the siding of the original conversation would ultimately just be kicking the can further to down the road to further select boards, and then be the same beast, and it'd probably just get more expensive.
Yeah.
Over time.
I think it was important for the town to know the liability it's assuming in the structure as well. I mean, that's part of the conversation, is its lack of accessibility and the lack of structural strength in the building for the uses it's being used for. It's an
Yeah.
issue. It's important.
So we are fortunate in the fact that this building is not, in fact, say, the town office and in high demand, and we have a lot of records and traffic going in and out of it, so it feels okay from my standpoint. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but having it just sort of be there for now, for the short term, is okay. And I feel we can't unring this bell. We can't ignore it.
No.
Without further conversation, I am certainly not willing to tack on $600,000 to the upcoming budget. But I think that having a more integrated conversation with key parties, ourselves, the budget committee, LIA officers, hopefully yourself, the Historical Society, anyone else who would factor in as a key player in a workshop setting, so that we can have a little bit more of a roundtable to really, in a structured way, but dig into historic, emotional, financial, and what the potential outcomes are from that.
Yes.
So does
That
that sound
sounds-
amenable to
Yeah, that
everyone?
sounds very
That's very good.
So David, can we task you with trying to herd all of those cats?
Yes.
And in a time, I mean, I recognize that the holidays are coming up, but obviously, the sooner the better, really, to get this conversation started.
Do
Makes
you want a
sense.
motion?
Do you need a motion for that, or do you think?
Not if you're gonna be satisfied when I come back with the date. And you don't say you went
Yeah.
crazy, you went off the rails, Dave.
Yeah, there's,
Well, is this gonna happen before January 1st? I mean,
Getting something together between now and the end of the year is gonna
You
be,
might be able to get it first couple weeks in January.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a motion, just so that the record's very clear,
Okay.
because I think moving forward, having very clear meeting minutes regarding this conversation will be fruitful.
Okay. I move to have the town administrator arrange for a workshop session between the Board of Selectmen, the Budget Committee, the Lincolnville Improvement Association, the Lincolnville Historical Society, and 2A Architects to discuss the findings of the LIA building assessment and cost estimate, with the goal of holding the workshop during the first full week of January, if at all possible.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. So, thank you for presuming on your time in the future more.
Yeah,
But I think it
absolutely.
will be a great
So
conversation.
while Amanda's still here, and this is all in everybody's mind, there have been a number of people that were on that list that haven't been more involved. So I'm just thinking of
Sharing the data.
agenda-wise, well, all this stuff's public record and we'll gladly share it with anybody. But in terms of, we should have, agenda-wise, some sort of basic presentation of the pitfalls of the current building and challenges. And
That's a
then
great idea.
have some conversation about solutions, and then kind of open it up for,
Well, you know,
Brainstorm
I would like
ideas.
to hear from the people using it. I'd like to know exactly what it's being used for.
yep.
Um, I'm just looking at this and, yeah, we can preserve a building and we can preserve the site, and do we need a building that big? Because we've already got a structure there that with some work needs to be, it can be functional, but do we need the top floor? We're gonna put a roof on anyway. How about having a single floor? I don't know, I wanna, you know.
Well, and I think
that type
that's
of
in the
thing.
workshop,
Yeah,
throwing,
yeah,
you know.
that's, and that's why I wanna know, what are we using
So
it
you're
for
talking about
exactly?
the agenda for the workshop?
Right,
Yeah.
Yes.
and also what type of information, additional information beyond what you have available to you and we'll make available to these others, do we need to make sure we have there and for conversation, either from the Historical Society,
Yeah.
from the LIA, or from us?
Can we have the meeting in the building, the workshop in the building?
Is it safe?
Well, the downstairs.
We can
The
meet on the
downstairs.
first floor, yes, yeah.
My one concern is not having the video record.
Yeah,
And,
Oh, yeah.
but that being said, a site visit may not be
At least for us. yeah,
out
so-
of order. Just to have it all fresh in our minds.
Mhm.
This costs
Sure,
this
we
much,
can do a
this costs
walkthrough,
this
yeah.
much, this
Yeah,
costs
yeah.
this much. So would that make sense, do you think, a site walk and then
Yeah.
convene back here so that we can have,
It's gonna be a full meeting and a half, yep.
yeah?
Yep. Sure. If that's what you want, we can make anything happen.
I think anything other than that,
Like an optional site visit to start and then
Mhm.
continue on with the,
Yeah, that's
limited
great.
in time and scope, because,
right,
Mhm.
just kind of see what you're up against and then. Yep.
yeah.
Great.
But yes, I think a full presentation from.
Sure.
To talk about history, where we are, and then current uses, if there are.
Maybe, what other uses it might have that it's not having? That might
Yeah.
get more people to throw more money at it, maybe.
Yeah.
'Cause the way I see this, if it's gonna work at all, it's gonna be fundraisers and people that, people in town that are gonna wanna see the building preserved and throw some bucks at it. I mean, the tax dollars are gonna be thrown at it, but
Yep.
if we get some more thrown at it, it might be a lot more likely to happen.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or points that we may want to include on an agenda for that workshop?
Well, we ought to, at some point, have, well, maybe after the workshop or whatever, but have some discussions on the options, particularly like the siding. If you're
Yes.
talking, you have an option of a wooden siding
Cedar,
versus,
yeah.
versus vinyl.
Yeah.
The, shall I say, the historical qualities of the building may be deteriorated
Yep.
by putting vinyl siding on it.
Well,
I still have the question of how much money do you want to spend to preserve the word historical?
Well,
When you're
that's,
replacing half the building.
Yeah, and can we take half the money and build a single floor building that's completely functional for what the use is?
And perhaps really energy efficient.
well,
Yeah, so what, you know,
well, there's a lot of conversation amongst, as the chair referred to, in terms of function versus historical significance versus emotion. You know, and these are all things that the community as a whole has to flesh out on all of these type of projects, because
You gotta honor that conversation.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
absolutely.
to be fair, it would bear bringing up in the workshop setting, does it make sense to remove the town from this conversation entirely? Because we are,
Absolutely.
as we hinted at with the solar agreement, we don't take advantage of tax credits. We are limited in terms of donations, and I mean, we are a wonderful structure, and yet the bureaucracy of it all encumbers us in a much more expensive and cumbersome mechanism of both getting funding and executing any projects. And so,
Could,
you know,
could the town
Yep.
give it back to one of the entities that gave it to the town, and after it's fixed, take it back over to run it again?
David, you're on fire tonight.
a couple of things from you.
in answer to your question,
I mean, I know
Yeah.
we're playing games here, but the government does it all the time, what the heck?
the townspeople, town meeting,
Yeah.
could certainly gift, sell, transfer property ownership to another entity it so chose. The other entity obviously has to be willing to accept it, which is another question. And then at some point in the future, if that other entity wanted to offer it back to the town, then the town could have a conversation and vote to accept something.
Because that would allow it not to be a town structure, so that it could be eligible for other monies the town couldn't accept.
Yeah, and there may be things that the town actually can accept monies that other people can't. We haven't really explored any of
Yeah.
those roads, because we didn't really know what type of monies we were up against, but
Right.
How did that go with the library, right? Didn't the library take over, did the town ever own the library? Or
the
was
town
that-
owns the land.
Right,
At one point, way back in the day, the town owned the library structure, and then it got into private hands. It was privately owned, and then the Historical Society, Lincolnville Community, or Lincolnville,
Historical Society has.
yeah, acquired the rights to the building, moved it across the street
right.
onto town-owned land, which they leased from the town.
By hand, I might add.
Well, and again, so
A
I
few
don't.
hands.
But the Historical Society still owns that building.
No, the Lincolnville Community Library owns the building now.
Oh, Lincolnville
Because the
Community
Historical
We
Society,
have a
But-
memorandum of understanding with the
Yeah.
Historical Society, but they're out of it basically at this point. It's the libraries, because we became our own 501c3, and originally they were the 501c3. They could
Oh,
accept
that,
the monies.
right, okay, now the library's its own thing. But it didn't go back to the town.
So,
but-
not that I-
No.
Not that I want to shut down a very wonderful
No, I know,
conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
However, I don't encourage conversation between the board and the
Right.
audience where the people at home cannot participate. So, what I would say is that we schedule this workshop meeting and we not mire ourselves in brainstorming at this point in time. And I encourage everyone and anyone to do their background homework leading up to this workshop.
Yes. I would also note, for the board's knowledge, in case you're unaware, the cost estimate concludes what we've contracted with 2A and the other consultants for. So if there are expenses moving forward, we'll be on the clock again.
Yep.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yes. So while we have Amanda here, is there anything else that anyone wishes to have clarified within this document? And
Nothing
again,
else?
I feel like you did a very clear and comprehensive job of doing exactly what you asked,
Good.
or what we asked you for, and now hopefully with a little bit more of your help, we can figure out a direction to go in.
I think that's the question we've been headed towards for a long time, is getting to this point so that we can ask that background question of what's the value.
Right,
to the
having
town.
that
Yes.
known
Yes. Yes.
quantity.
Dollars versus value, I
Yeah,
suppose.
and as terrifying as it is, it's very helpful to know the scope.
Yes, good.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
No,
We'll see
thank you.
in January.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Yep.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
And David, you'll just follow up with us to figure out how to
I will
nail down all the,
do my best to get everybody on the same page at the same day at the same time.
I know you will.
And I should also add, if we want, we could live stream the site walk. I could do it from my phone using the town's YouTube page.
Yep.
So people
Yep.
could see that, and then the actual workshop would be a separate link. So yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this? You look.
Nope. You have what you need?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we have a follow-up conversation regarding fiber optic in our community. David, do you want to give a little preamble?
Sure. About a month ago, the Alan Hinsey and Randall Manning were here from Lincolnville Networks or Lincolnville Communications and made a presentation to the board about the possibility of being a smart, connected community and having 100% fiber to the home. And within that, they outlined how many miles of fiber they had here in Lincolnville now and how many more miles there would be necessary to have fiber optic available to every residence in Lincolnville. And there are many mechanisms to get to the end, whether it just be private investment or they Connect Me grants or some private investments, some municipal investments, some Connect Me grant possibly. And they were looking for some sort of idea if we were interested in moving forward, and if so, not necessarily all the details, but if it was even something that was of interest to the board to invest their time and our effort in.
Thoughts?
Is that a generous?
It's an absolute no-brainer for us to work with them in some fashion. I don't know if we want to spend taxpayers' dollars to help a private entity install fiber so they can make more money. But I mean, it's a no-brainer that we would want our whole community to have access to fiber optic if they so chose to pay for it.
I agree with that general concept, for sure.
I agree with that 100%. My concern is there's a lot of opposition to this entity that has come to us with a proposal out in the community because of the current service that they are providing, not to mention the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that the taxpayers of this town should be involved with a yay or a nay on this. I'm not sure if I'd wager that there's more upset customers out there than there aren't, but I would think it's pretty close. People are not happy.
Oh.
I hear
We
people
hear about it all the
This
time.
town is not happy, so
Yeah.
I don't know as I could actually get behind it without having the townspeople say, get behind it.
Mhm.
You know, I just,
That
is tough.
I would go along with that because I know from my own dealings with them, and I've had, it's been reasonably good dealings, but they're not, I don't feel that they're, in some aspects of them, is not as easy to deal with as others. On the other aspects, they have been extremely good. You know, so I mean, it depends on what part of their business structure we're talking about.
The thing that struck me is, that I found interesting is how many of our citizens who currently have access to fiber optic are not aware that it is running by their property. And I had a conversation with David about, do they educate the community about the fact that they've already run fiber optic down the road and all you have to do is call and schedule it and they cover the first 250 feet and all of these wonderful things that, and it's how many miles again?
We have 41 now, and we need 20-something more to get everybody, or?
I mean, I feel we would
estimated?
be massively remiss in not forming a structured conversation in some way because of the frustration we all have received formally by people coming to us during citizens forum and outside of our meetings. And so I would throw out there that perhaps forming an ad hoc committee with a very specific purpose of working on an education program for the already existing structure to get people connected, and then to gather a scope of interest, or sentiment, interest / sentiment of the current service, future options and opportunities therein before we even touch the idea. I mean, it's just so cart before the horse to talk about financially partnering with a private entity for a utility.
Right.
There isn't any competition, is there? I mean, there isn't anybody else that could provide it. I mean,
Well,
no, I'm not saying we should, I'm just.
not anybody, but almost anybody could provide it. There's no prohibition to another company.
They're just not here.
They're just not here. And
Right.
Not here, not interested in incurring the cost and
Running
it-
miles of fiber all around Lincolnville.
Right.
When they have 41.5 miles already in place.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
they've got a big head start.
Mm-hmm.
See, back when that fiber was run, I know for myself, I was pretty upset, not knowing what was going on, and then having my lawn dug up, and then calling to have it set up because the service that they were selling me wasn't adequate for my wife to work from home. So I needed to have fiber so that there wouldn't be any interruption because of the type of phone that the business that she works for required her to have. They didn't, or whoever the customer service representative was, didn't even know that there was fiber on the road I live on, much less that I live across from the switch that Lincolnville Telephone Company owns.
Wow.
So
the right hand wasn't talking
it was
about
gonna
that.
be so many thousands of dollars to run fiber on the road, and I'm like,
it's right
I'm
there.
like, it's on a telephone pole that my driveway is right beside.
Mhm.
It's maximum of 70 feet of wire.
Right.
Why don't you know this? So those are the types of things that breed the negative interaction or the negative thoughts about Lincolnville Telephone or Lincolnville Networks or whichever this is gonna be. And now they're asking for the town to partner with them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I think we
I
need to
feel-
take a step back, and this is a beautiful opportunity for us to get
It is.
involved.
It is.
Open
And
to the
and there was I think you may have answered it on the Lincolnville bulletin board about someone who just couldn't understand or wanted fiber and didn't know, and you told them that there was a presentation and that they should take a look at this, and maybe you even supplied that to them.
I don't like it.
But we need to get the information out there. I need to know how the taxpayers feel about partnering with them because
Well, there are-
myself, if I was going to make that decision, I'm not on board with that.
there are many levels of partnership, I guess, and we, or you, not we, because I'm not part of this, I mean, you, the five of you, could clearly say, go run your business any way you want, we don't want to be involved. And then there's, oh, you'd like to have some of our involvement because it might help you access money? Because there are some Connect Me grants. I mean, we, the town, I don't know how many years ago now, wrote a letter of support for a Connect Me grant, which they obtained, and I think it went up Green Acre Road, was an underserved area. So there's certainly lending support without necessarily writing a check.
Yeah.
And then,
Just a letter, really.
there's that whole spectrum of involvement or partnership. And I know from meeting with other managers and administrators to talk about fiber, and this is a terrible map because this one's black and white, but I bring in that 2017 map that we had when they had the meeting over at the school to that meeting, and they're like, how does Lincolnville have that much fiber?
No one knows. Not even the people in Lincolnville.
And and it's like, oh, I don't know, the phone companies put it in. Well, we don't have that much,
Well,
and
we
we're
had that big push to do that.
right. And customer service may be set aside momentarily. The amount of fiber that's in Lincolnville is the envy of a lot of communities right now.
Yeah.
And if we could get, from my way of thinking, if you can get to 100%, wow.
That's good for the town.
That's good for everybody that lives there. I mean, look at what Alsboro did. Alsboro sunk in, multi-million.
Everybody's connected out there.
Yeah.
Everybody.
For like
Yeah.
$35 a month or $40
Yeah.
a month.
Yeah.
Heavily subsidized.
Yes.
Heavily
Yeah,
subsidized.
it is.
Yeah, it is.
Massively
It is.
subsidized, but yes.
And if you view it as, I'm going to sell my house and move, and somebody shows up and, oh, you have fiber at your house? Yeah, I do. I mean, I remember when I moved to Lincolnville, we had dial-up. And I remember how happy I was when we went to DSL. And I know how happy we were to go from DSL to fiber.
Yeah.
And there are still many more levels of fiber that we could upgrade to, but haven't chosen that. So I think it's an opportunity, maybe not to jump in with both feet, but at least jump in to get that dialogue going.
Well, there are certainly huge benefits to this town being connected. Certainly. And I'm for that. But there's a lot of opposition out there. Although there's a lot of frustration out there, and people want it, but does everybody want to partner with, do they want us to get behind it? Because we got to come up with some money to do it.
Well, and ultimately, that's not really, I would love to just bring the conversation back to, do we want to talk about forming an ad hoc committee to look at education and information gathering so that we can get a really clear idea from our citizens, both to offer them a tool that they weren't aware that they had, but then perhaps have even that much more of a informed and impactful statement to be able to offer the utility and any assistance, whether it's a letter or otherwise, going forward.
To the utility.
Correct.
Saying if we're gonna,
Absolutely.
we've talked to the citizenry and
Correct.
we're thinking this is a good idea in general, but but there's some things we need to address first. And how do you as a company plan to address those things in order for the town to feel comfortable moving forward?
I mean, that's what I would hope would come from this.
That'd
And
be great.
I jotted down some notes that I think that at least one or two select board members should participate.
I would love to.
And that the primary goal be education of our citizens, and then an information gathering from, whether it's a scale of 1 to 5, check this, scale of 1 to 5, check this in terms of service, satisfaction. essentially doing what, say, I don't know, the utility should be doing with their customer base, but what have you. I feel like that's a privilege that we have sitting here, and understanding and knowing the degree of frustration our citizens have experienced.
Yeah.
So I guess how many people would we want to have on the committee total, so that we can have an idea of where to cap it, and then do we want a deadline of when we want results back? And should we have a motion first to approve the concept?
Well, if the consensus or the motion of the board is to form a ad hoc citizens committee versus the 5 of you taking this on, can probably put something together for a first draft for you to contemplate, for an upcoming meeting, and you can tweak it from there. At least we can get a kind of a framework of the items. But I didn't want to.
And then how does it? And then what? Then you send that out to ask for people to participate.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some conversations with a number of people since that presentation was made, and some expressing concern, frustration, happiness, whatever. And I keep saying, well, if the board puts together a committee, would you be? It's always the closing line. Would you be interested in possibly serving? Well, I'd want to know what was involved and what the tasks were, but they didn't come out and say no. So certainly, if anybody's still out there listening and watching, stay tuned, because it's coming down the pipe.
But thoughts on 1 or 2 select board members being good, and any thoughts on total quantity? 4 or 5. That way, if there's
people.
You're on the committee. What do you think?
7?
Quorum, I'm thinking quorum.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
7 feels.
You can always change it,
and then we can think about maybe scope, timing, that kind of thing, because having a firm deadline to get back by often helps.
Did they give us a deadline?
Well, there were a couple of different timelines. They're looking for, they're in hopes that there's another Connect Me grant program going to come rolling out in the upcoming year. And, they obviously can move as fast or as slow as we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So.
Anything else, David? Do you need any more clarification?
No, I think
on
that gets the ball rolling, and I'll keep it rolling.
Fantastic. If there's nothing else more on that particular topic, we have the treasurer and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
I move that we do the treasurer's and payroll warrants. I spoke before I read.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? And I now need a motion to enter into executive session for property tax abatement due to poverty and/or disability.
I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing possible property tax abatements due to poverty and/or disability pursuant to Title I MRSA Section 4056F and Title 36 Section 8412E.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much.